When Solo Leveling Season 1 was initially airing, it didn't catch my interest. It looked generic and boring to me, but people hyped it up, calling it a really good anime. Solo Leveling Season 2 finished airing recently, and people called it a masterpiece, one of the best animes around. But reading a bit of a synopsis, I still didn't get the hype around it and started hating on it. I remembered how I used to throw hate on Attack on Titan back when the manga ending came out, without even watching the anime, until I got my sorry ass to actually watch AOT and got slapped with utter peak. So, I decided to properly watch Solo Leveling 2, not expecting AOT levels to peak, but at least a decent story. 3 days later, being caught up with the anime, I gotta say, I give it to the haters. It's really just hype moments and aura. Solo Leveling is an anime about a protagonist, Jin-Woo, dubbed the weakest hunter in mankind, getting RPG's powers and becoming the strongest hunter. These type of stories are not uncommon, but rarely are they good. Is Solo Leveling the exception? Not at all. Even with the mildly interesting beginning it has, it still goes the generic route. But then, why does it get praised a lot? The good things about Solo Leveling, it's its animation. A1 Pictures goes far and beyond in for Solo Leveling's animation. You don't really see this until episode 4 of the first season, but from there it goes hard on the fights, with some really nice cuts and scenes that I admire. And the CGI was used pretty good, blending in almost perfectly with the background. Visually, it's a pretty looking anime, and the way the OST and insert music is used is done really well. Well, that's everything good about Solo Leveling, because the actual story is as boring and as generic as it can get. These type of stories with the main character going from the weakest to the strongest are pretty common with isekai and shonen, the best example for me being the Rising of the Shield Hero. Now for me going from the weakest hero of all 4 of the cardinal heroes to becoming the strongest of the 4. Solo Leveling goes for a similar path. Jin-Woo is introduced to us as the weakest hunter in mankind, much weaker than your average E-rank hunter. One day his party finds another dungeon in the gate they were in, and almost dying in a ritual he gets awarded game-like powers. He wakes up in a hospital and now he sees screens like those in video games, and we get to see how his power works. He enters a solo dungeon, gets almost raw dogged by the enemies in there, somehow survives, and leaving the dungeon he pierces a B-rank enemy's defense. I personally enjoyed the first 4 episodes. Sure, it was a pretty generic start to his story, but at least it showed instances of being able to do something more. But episode 5 and 6 came around, and it shattered all of that for me. To be fair, the premise of 5 and 6 wasn't even my problem. Jin-Woo was my problem. Jin-Woo is introduced to us as this timid yet intuitive person. Once he obtains his powers, he still has that same personality, yet now has more confidence in facing his opponents. And we see him struggling in that solo dungeon he enters in with his newfound powers, so it seems like they will be like this for a while. So, don't imagine my surprise when we see him in episode 5, not only completely different from the last episode, taller, hair is different, his jawline is a goddamn spike and he is ripped as fuck, but now he's a cold man, dense and silent. This is not the Jin-Woo we were introduced to. This is an entirely different character. And I get that characters are meant to develop, but this was a complete overhaul of a character. From one episode to another, he just changes, nothing to really back it up. This is lazy writing. For a show called Solo Leveling, I imagine we will get to see more of not only his physical leveling, but also mentally, as the show progresses. Starting with his physical progress, his physical change could have been done little by little in Season 1, maybe seeing his full change in the early episodes of Season 2. But no, we need the nurses to say how hot he looks. How do I justify such a change for this scene to happen? A system, that'll do it. Seeing him slowly grow as the episode's progress would have been logical and a nice detail, but we need the fangirling, guys, you gotta understand. And get into the mental part, didn't he almost fucking die? I mean, you could have done so much with that. I don't know, even with his new powers, he now fears dungeons even more because of such a traumatizing experience. His fucking limbs got torn off, he was impaled and almost offered as a sacrifice. I don't know, no normal person will go back to just grind after that. They would be rightfully afraid of seeing something like that again. A good example is the healer, and she didn't get the worst part of it. And because of this, he is unable to focus on the dungeon because of his fear of the statue appearing again or something like that. Yet he still enters to get stronger, using this opportunity to give him a proper backstory as well as maybe developing the personality of the mother and the sister. Him polishing his resolve until the end of Season 1. where he fully overcomes that fear in the fight with Igress and ends the season with him being a low A tier, high B tier hunter and with his necromancer powers. Much more rewarding and meaningful. I know that episode 4 and 12 kinda does this, but it really only uses it for the hype moments and not really for the character development. Due to the fact that on other similar instances, he doesn't have these thoughts at all, he just goes serious mode and defeats his enemies. I really thought we were gonna see him slowly gain courage and determination to get stronger, but no, here comes this in episode 4, now he goes to dungeons alone to soul level and defeats all of his enemies. Woohoo! The most boring outcome to the season. Sure, I don't think people would be interested in seeing him go to random dungeons, but at least the ones we see, we do see him struggle. Scars or injuries in the montage could have added more to it. Heck, his clothes being a bit messy could have done wonders. But it doesn't fucking matter after episode 4. He is now strong and clears gates by himself, and wow! Jin-Woo had a second awakening. He now defeats a B-rank level Megami lookalike assassin. Now he enters big dungeon and now he struggles a bit. But guess what? He gets saved by bullshit convenience and defeats more enemies. Now he gets even more OP. So interesting! And don't get me started with season 2, because if season 1 had a chance to make something more with its plot, season 2 does not have this anymore, and it generally becomes just hype moments and aura, and the MC gets more overpowered, and the MC is much colder and almost every important girl falls for him. At this point, just add his sister and his mother, because we need more people to fall in love with him, and you know what? Make the old guy fall in love with him too! And we see S-Ranks, the strongest hunters in the region, getting hyped up for 1.5 seasons, finally becoming relevant, just to get one-shotted by the enemy for Jin-Woo to come and save the day! All of them get the spotlight for one episode and GG's, they get clapped, and guess what? Jin-Woo goes to the island with his bullshit powers and defeats the bad guy with literal ease. He can now be considered the strongest fucking hunter in South Korea in just 2 seasons. And we still have 9 arcs, around 2ish more seasons left, to go! I can guess what will happen from there. Stronger enemies from other dimensions appear, as it was insinuated in the end of season 2, or even other players that only Jin-Woo will be able to defeat them because S-ranks are fucking useless now. Some other character to get some power up, or something tragic happens to Jin-Woo that will help him get more OP, some more fights, and then a statue finally appears again. Final battle or something similar happens, and GG's. It's a wrap. I would honestly be surprised if that's not the case. This could have been paced much slower, that had a much more rewarding result to it than just Jin-Woo weak, now Jin-Woo strong as fuck. It becomes such a boring drag once you know Jin-Woo will win, and there is no real stakes in the fight you're watching. Seeing him lose at the beginning of the story, right when he got his powers, and paired with the trauma, could have raised more stakes in the last battle of season 1. Remember that teleporter wound he got? He could have used it in the first try. Got it again in his random loot boxes, and on our second try of using it, it would go as in the anime. Seeing him lose even with his newfound powers could have made a sense of helplessness, and when he stood up, it would be impactful, emotional, exciting and such, but it does nothing. Instead of making the main character more interesting and engaging to watch, they just make him aura farm, add some, oh, I used to be the weakest, 2 points open parentheses, to the battle that he's in, and call it a day. How is his powers the only thing interesting from this fucking anime? Jin-Woo fails to entertain me as a main character due to how plain and one-dimensional he is, and the story does not help as well. It's really frustrating because having the power to transform this power fantasy slop into a good or decent story, it stays in mediocrity and does nothing to actually make the story interesting. Sure, you could say I was expecting too much for a power fantasy slop, but due to the praise it was getting, I was expecting at least a coherent, good story, but it just goes to the system being the most convenient plot device out there, that it can do everything, and Jin-Woo just being a boring MC with no personality. Soul Leveling is a bad anime that has opportunities into making a proper story out of it, and yet still decides to draw to mediocrity. Sure, it does hype moments in aura well, but that's pretty much it, because every episode that doesn't have hype moments in aura is just boring as shit. It fails to entertain me. I don't know if I will read the manhwa, maybe in my free time, to give a proper review to the entire story of Soul Leveling, and see if I'm right or wrong in calling this overrated trash. Put me in the comments if you would like a review of it. But as of right now, 2 seasons in, Soul Leveling is absolute garbage, where only the fights are entertaining, and even then, if A1 Pictures wouldn't have given it the level of production it has, it would be garbage in that department too. This is Noodlefucker saying, like, subscribe, and good night. Notice how I didn't talk much about the side characters? Yeah, they're that forgettable.